The next step is to protect our backend service. We don't want anyone to be able to just call our backend service. So I'll show you how to add some kind of authentication on our endpoint. As you can see from the diagram, I have introduced a new component which is called Keycloak. Keycloak is an open source identity and access management resource that provides authentication, authorization, and user management for application and services. It supports single sign-on OAuth 2, which is the one I'll be showing you, SAML, RBAC, multi-factor authentication, and LDAP as well. But the one we will be using to protect our API gateway and the backend services is OAuth 2. So we want our client to be authenticated, and I will show you how to do that using Keycloak. The first thing we need to do is add a couple more services in our Docker Compose. So open inventory service, go to the Docker Compose, and let's add 2 more services. The first one is a Keycloak database, and the second one is the actual Keycloak instance. So go ahead and add these 2 services to your Docker Compose. The first one is a database. It's again a MySQL DB. We have defined the database name, root, and password. And then we need to define the actual Keycloak service, which depends on this database. So there are few things we have defined, such as environment variables. We have a Keycloak admin, a username, and a password. We will need these 2 later. And you need to define a port. So I've chosen 8091 as 8090 is the one running API gateway, and the next one will be the one for Keycloak. And once we have this, let's run Docker Compose app -d. So this is running successfully. Let's test. Open a new browser page and let's go to localhost 8091. So we're going to be using admin and admin as password. And this is what you will be shown. So we can see that we are in the master realm. What is a realm? I'll show you in a bit. We now need to create a new realm. So just click here and click on new realm. A realm is basically a set of users' credentials, roles, and groups. And realms are isolated from one another, and they can only manage and authenticate the users that they control. So generally for each application you're running, you will have a different realm. In our case, we will be calling this realm ticketing security realm. We want to enable it, and let's create. So a realm was created successfully. Make sure it's selected from this drop-down menu. Let's go to clients, and we want to create a new client. We want to give it a name. I will be calling it ticketing client ID, and the rest is not compulsory. So let's click next. So here we do want to activate client authentication. We want to authenticate our client requests. In this case, for us, the client is Postman. Let's deactivate the standard flow. If you click on these icons, you'll see what these are. Let's also stop direct access grants. This is the one that accepts username and password. Instead, we're going to be selecting the service account roles. We will be able to use client credentials to get a JWT token and use that for authentication. Let's click next. We don't need anything here. Let's click save. And the client was created successfully with this client ID. We will be needing this client ID and these credentials, so this client secret. You can regenerate this. That's the good thing. Let's say this gets compromised, you can simply regenerate one. Or you should be also able to add key rotation, but that's not in the scope of this video. We will be using this credential. So now let's go to realm settings. And if you scroll down, we have OpenID endpoint configurations. So these are a bunch of information we are going to need to set up our API gateway to implement Spring Security. So I'll show you the ones we need later. Now that we have configured our Keycloak, we can now go to API Gateway. So in here, we need to open our pom.xml, and we need to add a new dependency. So if we go down to dependencies and let's add a new dependency, and what we need is Spring boot-starter OAuth2 resource server, and the group ID is org.springframework.boot. Let's reload, and this dependency should be pulled. Now let's create a new package, and we're going to be calling it config, and this is where we will have our security configuration. So let's create a new class and let's call it security config. This is going to be a configuration class. We need a bunch of things, so we want to create a bean, and this is going to be a public security filter chain. Let's import and security filter chain. It's going to accept an HTTP security object, and here we will need to return a HTTP security.authorize HTTP requests. We're going to have a lambda requests, and authorize requests. We want to authorize any request authenticated, and then we want to do OAuth2 resource server, another lambda, and we want OAuth.jwt to accept a customizer with defaults. And now we can build this object. Make sure to add this throws exception. We also need to add a new bean. So this bean is going to be a public JWT decoder. Let's import, and we're going to return a Nimbus JWT decoder with JWKS set URI. So this is a decoder, and we'll use this to get our JWT and authenticate it with the Keycloak public key. We need to define this Keycloak auth JWK set URI. So we want to add this in our coder. So Nimbus. Let's import this, and now let's go to application.properties. In our application.properties, let's define Keycloak properties. So the first one is we need to set this JWK URI. Let's go back to this page, and we can see there is a JWKS URI. This is the endpoint that our API gateway will send the JWT to get it verified, basically. In simple words, that's what's going to happen. So let's add it here. And we also need another property. We need to define the JWT issuer URI, and we have this one. This is the one you can get from up here. This is the issuer URI, and this is the one we need. So just also add this second property. So this should be all we need to add security to our API gateway. Now let's run our services. So let's make sure our Docker Compose containers are running. Let's run inventory service. Let's run our booking service. And let's run our order service. Let's also run our API gateway. Let's open Postman. So let's try to send a request without adding any authorization. Let's see what happens. As expected, this is returning a 401 unauthorized. So we need to add our OAuth2 token. To do that, we can go to authorization, select OAuth2. If you scroll down, let's go to configure new token. Let's give it a name. I called it token. Grant type, we're going to use client credential. We need an access token URL. So if you go back to our page, here we can find our access token URL, which is the token endpoint. Let's paste it here. We need our client ID. We can find our client ID by going into our realm, then clicking clients and going inside our ticketing client ID. Let's copy. Let's paste it here. The next is the client secret. So from within the client, let's go to credentials and let's copy this client secret. Let's paste and make sure you have this OpenID roles. leave client authentication as send as basic auth header. And now let's click on get new access token. Authentication complete. Let's click proceed. And we can see this token was generated. So it's a bearer token that we will be sending as part of our request. So click on use token. And this token has been added up here as a bearer. So it will be sent as a header in our request. So if we now click send, we can see that we got a 200 back and authentication is working. So we have ordered 50 tickets. Let's see if the inventory service is protected as well. We can add OAuth 2 and let's get the token, proceed, use token. These were auto-filled, by the way. You just need to do it once. Let's click send and we can see that this is working as well. So in this section, we have added security to our API gateway. What this means is that any client, before being able to send requests to our backend, will need to go through the API gateway, and API gateway will need to authenticate the request. So the client will be getting a bearer token. This will be sent to API gateway. API gateway will take this token and then verify it with Keycloak. If it is valid, it will forward our request to either booking service or inventory service. In the next section, we are going to see how to make our architecture resilient to failures.